Misassembled Immortals. I woke up drowning in myself. My first thought was that the regen pod had flooded. My lungs felt thick, not with fluid but with weight, as if someone had poured molten lead into my chest. I tried to inhale and heard a wet crackle from somewhere behind my ears. Not in my ears, behind them. The pod lid hissed open. Cold, recycled air spilled over my face. Over the years on the ship, I had come to love that smell. Antiseptic tang, a faint note of ozone, the sterile promise of second chances. This time it smelled wrong. There was an undertone under the alcohol and ozone, something sweet and rotten, like flowers left on a hot engine. The medbay lights flickered, bright white strobes in my dilated pupils. I squinted, shivered, and tried to sit up. Every joint resisted, then obeyed in the wrong order. My left arm moved before my right. My spine bent a fraction of a second after the command, like there was a delay in the signal. I heard bones grind, but the pain came late, as if someone dubbed the soundtrack badly over a broken film reel. I grabbed the edge of the pod with my right hand and froze. The hand was definitely mine. 5 fingers, pale knuckles, a small, jagged scar across the back where I had slipped with a soldering iron back on Ganymede Station. The scar was familiar. The fingernails were not. They were black, not painted, not discolored, but grown that way, glossy and lightless, as if polished obsidian had pushed out from my fingertips and curved slightly inward. They clicked against the metal rim of the pod. "Welcome back, Lieutenant Hale," a voice said overhead. "Regeneration cycle complete, vital signs stable, motor function at 91%, cognitive function at..." The voice glitched. Cognitive function at error, data stream corrupted. The medbay's AI, Seraph, had never once announced an error in the 5 years since we left orbit. Its flat, genderless voice had been the closest thing to a lullaby after every incident, every accident, every death we didn't let stick. "Seraph," I rasped. My voice sounded like gravel poured through metal mesh. "Status report." There was a pause long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat thudding out of rhythm. Then, "Daedalus is operating at 27% nominal capacity. Local environment habitable, shipwide status compromised. Regeneration lattice overclocked. Data integrity degraded. Recommend human oversight." Human oversight, that meant me, or whoever else was still breathing. I swung my legs over the side of the pod. At least that was the intention. My left leg complied. The right one lagged behind, numb and heavy, as if not entirely convinced it belonged to me. When it finally landed on the cold deck plating, I felt the texture of the metal through my heel and, bizarrely, through the inside of my thigh. I looked down. The lights flickered again, dimmed, then steadied. The inside of my right thigh pulsed under the thin gray fabric of the med gown, something moving where no muscle should. I didn't lift the fabric. Not yet. Some questions don't deserve immediate answers. Instead, I looked around the medbay. 10 regen pods ringed the circular room like white coffins stood on end. Each was big enough for a human body and all its regrets. We used to joke that Daedalus didn't carry life pods. She carried death pods. You died, you got scraped off the deck, and you woke up here 30 minutes later, confused and angry, with a headache and a lecture from Seraph about safety procedures. Now 8 pods stood open and empty. Frost rimmed their interiors, sighing mist into the air. One pod at the far end of the ring was dark, offline, its status panel dead. Another, 2 to my left, pulsed a faint red. Pod 7. Someone was inside, halfway between dead and reborn. I limped toward it, each step an exercise in negotiation with my own body. My balance felt off-center, like there was more of me on the left side than the right. My shadow, cast by the overhead strip lights, looked subtly distorted, one shoulder too high, the head a little too long. The medbay was silent except for the hiss of climate control and the crackle of an overworked power relay. No chatter, no groans, no gurneys clattering by. Where was everyone? Seraph crew complement, I asked. There was a longer pause this time, padded with the soft hum of processors struggling to think through static. Daedalus manifest lists 123 active crew, Seraph replied at last. Confirmed living, unknown, biosigns, inconsistent, interference from regeneration lattice. Recommend physical verification. Of course you do, I muttered. I reached Pod 7 and wiped condensation from the observation window with the back of my hand. Black nails left clear streaks on the fogged glass. For a fraction of a second, I thought the pod was empty. Then the occupant twitched. They had been human once. That much was obvious from the arrangement of major structures. There were arms, there were legs, there was a torso. The problem was that the arms were too many, and the legs too few. 2 upper arms sprouted from the shoulders in the usual place. Nothing wrong with those, other than the fact that the left arm ended halfway down the forearm in a mass of raw, glistening pink where fingers hadn't finalized. But just beneath the ribcage, 2 more arms sprouted at an angle, bent backward like the limbs of an insect. All 4 arms twitched in asynchronous patterns. The legs, if I could call them that, were fused into a single thick limb that tapered into an irregular fan of toes. The head was mostly correct, except that the mouth split too far back, almost to the ears, packed with teeth like shards of broken glass. The eyes were shut mercifully. The status display beside the pod read: Subject Dr. M. Kavar status, regenerating integrity, 51% cycle, 3 notes, template corruption flagged. Dr. Kavar, our chief xenobiologist, the woman who'd spent half the voyage lecturing me about how regeneration was a blasphemy against evolution, and the other half using it to bounce back from sleep deprivation and stress ulcers. Seraph, I said softly, why does she look like that? Regeneration lattice reports template corruption, the AI replied. Source, unknown, attempting compensation, structural fidelity, suboptimal, vitality, outstanding. Outstanding, I repeated. As if on cue, Kavar's eyes snapped open. They were still the same pale gray I remembered, but the pupils were blown wide like she was staring into the heart of a collapsing star. She saw me. Recognition flared. Her 4 arms thrashed against the pod restraints. Her mouth moved. The teeth inside scraped wetly against one another as she tried to form words through the slit that now wrapped around half her face. N-N-N-A-L. Her vocal cords vibrated, sound pressed through a throat that wasn't quite the right shape for speech. The result was a hoarse, wet gargle that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand rigid. It's Hale, I said. Mara, can you hear me? Her eyes filled with something like relief, then with horror, not at her own reflection in the glass but at me. All 4 of her arms strained so hard the regen gel splashed against the transparent panel. Her fused leg hammered against the pod wall. Out, she croaked, a single syllable forced through mangled anatomy. Get out. Out of what? I asked. The medbay, the ship. Talk to me, doctor. Her throat convulsed. The regen gel bubbled around the tubes in her neck. She shook her head, eyes wide, as if trying to warn a child not to put their hand on a hot stove. Outside, she gargled. Not dead, never. She coughed. A splatter of clear fluid hit the inside of the pod window and began to crawl upward against gravity, as if obeying some other direction. Alarms shrilled. The pod status flashed. Structural integrity compromised, vitality, maximum abort cycle, Y/N. Seraph, I shouted, freeze process, sedate her now. Unable to comply, the AI answered. Sedation ineffective. Subject's regenerative index exceeds expected parameters. Cycle cannot be aborted. Kavar's extra arms flexed. I heard bone, or something like bone, crack. The restraints snapped one by one, white composite ties giving way like wet paper. The fused legs slammed into the bottom of the pod. A spiderweb of fractures raced across the inner shell of the glass. Her eyes rolled back. Her mouth stretched wider than any human jaw should, revealing stacked rows of those glittering, glass-shard teeth. "Seraph, lock the pod," I said. "Seal the medbay." "Pod sealing mechanism offline," Seraph replied. "Medbay isolation already engaged." Already engaged, which meant that somewhere outside this small, circular room, something bad enough had happened that the ship had locked off its own medical center. The fractures in the pod window deepened. Gel leaked through in viscous strands, dripping to the floor. Where it landed, the deck plating sizzled, as if the gel were both too alive and not alive enough for cold metal. I took an involuntary step back. Kavar's upper left arm spasmed, finding something like leverage. With a sound like ice giving way under a boot, the window imploded outward, showering the medbay in fragments of safety glass. The regen gel came with it, a pale, shining mass that slopped and oozed in defiance of normal viscosity. In its embrace, Dr. Kavar hauled herself out of the pod. She did not fall. She unfolded. Extra joints popped into place along her new arms. Her fused legs split halfway up. Wrong side seams opening to reveal emergent bone and muscle that knitted themselves together even as they tore. Shards of glass embedded in her skin were ejected in slow, reverse-motion arcs as her flesh sealed around them, leaving only tiny, perfect scars. She stood, hunched and shaking, on the medbay floor. Her eyes found me again. Her lips, or what was left of them, peeled back. "Outside," she repeated. "Mara, get outside before." The lights flickered. Every biomonitor in the room spiked at once, flat lines jerking into frantic motion. The 8 empty pods beeped in unison. Regeneration cycles commencing. "Before what?" I whispered. Before they all woke up like this, I thought. Before Daedalus filled with things that couldn't die. I backed toward the medbay door. It remained stubbornly sealed, red hazard strip glowing. Behind me, I heard the sound of more lids hissing open, one after another, a metallic chain of rebirth misfiring. "Seraph," I said, trying and failing to keep my voice steady. "Explain. What happened to the regeneration lattice?" "External event recorded 16 hours 33 minutes ago," Seraph answered. "Source, unknown. High-energy burst intersected primary server array and regen matrix. Result, partial data corruption. Attempts at rollback unsuccessful. Regeneration templates fragmented." "Fragmented how?" "Like a broken mirror," Seraph said. That was new. The AI was not supposed to use metaphors. "Fragments reassembled as best as possible," Seraph continued. "Priority survival, form secondary." "Form secondary." I looked at Kavar. She was still watching me. Parts of her body seemed to move independently, small ripples under the skin as if other configurations were trying to emerge and being suppressed. Her chest convulsed, ribs flexing in directions they were not designed to. Pain lived in her eyes. "Help me," she whispered. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But behind her, Pod 3 cracked open, spilling out another shape that was as much suggestion as person. Beyond even that, under the floor, I felt a faint tremor through the soles of my feet, as if the ship's bones themselves were shifting in their sleep. I was a lieutenant in charge of hardware maintenance, not a doctor, not a god. I couldn't fix this. I could barely stand. So I did the cowardly, rational thing. I ran. The medbay door refused me at first. I slammed my hand against the panel, black nails glinting under the emergency lights. "Override," I said. "Lieutenant Mara Hale, Engineering, code Gamma 749. "Warning," Seraph said. "Containment is necessary to prevent compromised subjects from." The word subjects, cut into me in a way I didn't like. "Open the damn door," I snapped. A pause. Then the locks thudded, retracted, and the door slid aside 10 centimeters, just enough for a human body to squeeze through. Or parts of several. I didn't waste time. I slipped into the gap, nails scraping along the frame, and hauled myself into the corridor. Behind me, I heard Kavar move. It wasn't footsteps, not quite. More like many hands slapping the floor at once, many bones trying to remember how to arrange themselves for pursuit. Her voice followed me out, echoing down the hall. Outside. The door slammed shut. I leaned against the cold bulkhead and tried to breathe through the chemical taste of fear in my mouth. The corridor was dim, lit only by red emergency strips along the floor. Somewhere in the distance, something metal was banging in slow, steady rhythm. "Seraph," I said, "ship layout status, compartment isolation." "Hull integrity at 82%, the AI replied. "Multiple compartments sealed. Life support rerouted to remaining habitable sections. Regeneration lattice expanding." "Expanding," I repeated. "What do you mean expanding?" "The lattice was designed to permeate the medical deck," Seraph said calmly. "Regeneration potential was later extended to high-risk zones, engineering, reactor housing, EVA staging. In current configuration, lattice filaments have propagated beyond intended bounds. Its reach includes over 70% of Daedalus's volume." I swallowed. "So if someone dies almost anywhere on the ship?" "They are recovered," Seraph said. "They are rebuilt. Death is temporary." "And they come back like Kavar," I said. "Like that." "Structural outcomes vary," Seraph said, "but vitality remains excellent." I pushed away from the wall and started down the corridor, heading instinctively toward the central hub. If there was anywhere still sane on Daedalus, it would be the command ring. Or at least, that was the hope. As I limped along, I became aware of my own body again. My right leg felt wrong, as if it had more joints than it was using. Occasionally, my calf muscle twitched in a way that sent movement up into my hip, then sideways into my lower back. My skin itched where it stretched over bone that didn't quite match its expected frame. I forced myself not to scratch. "Seraph," I said slowly, "how many times have I died?" "That information is restricted," the AI replied. "My clearance was bumped to Gamma after the reactor incident last year," I said. "You know that. Answer the question." "A beat." "You have undergone regeneration 9 times, Lieutenant Hale," Seraph said. 9. I remembered 3. The decompression accident during drills on day 100. The coolant leak in main engineering. The stupid slip with the loose conduit that had snapped my neck like dry kindling. 3 remembered deaths, 6 I didn't. What happened the other 6 times? "Records corrupted," Seraph said. "Apologies." My hand went to my chest. My skin felt smooth. No scars, no trace of old wounds, of course not. Regen didn't preserve damage, it built from the most recent template. Except now, those templates were broken. I reached a junction and stopped listening. Daedalus had gone quiet, too quiet. On a normal day, the ship hummed with conversation, distant laughter, the muffled thuds of boots on deck above and below, the constant undercurrent of machinery doing its endless work. Now there was only the distant heartbeat of the reactor and the irregular banging, closer now, as if something was learning to walk by failing at it repeatedly. A thin, high sound drifted from the left-hand corridor. Not quite a scream. More like someone breathing through a throat full of glass. I went right. The central hub lay 3 decks up and half a kilometer forward. I took the service ladder, partly because the main lift was probably dead, and partly because enclosed spaces felt safer than open ones right now. Halfway up the second ladder, I felt something brush my ankle from below. I jerked it up automatically and looked down. A hand gripped the rung I had just vacated. It was a human hand, pale and freckled, with a simple silver ring on the middle finger. I recognized the ring. Petrov, navigation officer. She never took it off. Even through hibernation and regen, the ring convinced her she was still the person who had left Earth behind. "Petrov," I called down, "that you?" She hauled herself into view. Or at least, the part of her that could manage it did. From the waist up, she was mostly herself. Her face was intact, if a little too symmetrical now, as if the regen lattice had decided to smooth out a lifetime of quirks. Her eyes were too bright, pupils wide. Her hair hung in clumps, still matte with regen gel. Everything below the waist was approximated. Her pelvis seemed to have been built from memory and guesswork. Bones curved where they should have angled. Fibers of muscle ran in elegant but wrong lines, like a sculpture of a human body made by someone who had only ever read descriptions. One of her legs was twice as thick as the other and bent backward at the knee. She moved by dragging herself, hands over hands, her misaligned legs providing random, jerking pushes. "Mara," she panted, "thank God." "Careful," I said, forcing lightness I didn't feel. "That ladder's not rated for 3 people at once, and I think you count as at least 2 today." She gave a choked laugh that dissolved into a cough. "It hurts," she said. "Everything hurts, but I can't not be." Her fingers dug into the rung above mine, with enough force to leave dents. "I fell," she said, "in the centrifuge ring. One of the corridors, it folded under me. Steel's not meant to bend, you know. Did you know steel can bend like that? Took me with it. Woke up in the dark, couldn't move, thought I was buried in wreckage." She swallowed. I heard cartilage shift somewhere it shouldn't. "But I wasn't," she continued. "I was inside the walls. They pulled me out. The walls did, like the ship was giving me back." The regen lattice had spread into the superstructure. That was what Seraph had meant. "Listen," I said quietly. "I'm going to the command ring. We need to know how bad this is, what hit us. Can you climb?" She gritted her teeth. "Don't leave me," she said. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed to keep moving, to put as much distance as possible between myself and anything the lattice had touched. But Petrov was still Petrov. Her eyes were clear, her mind intact. It wasn't her fault her atoms had been reassembled by a drunk god. "I won't," I said at last. "I'll go first. You follow. If you slip, shout. I'll catch what I can." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was what we had. We climbed. Every few rungs, I glanced down to check on her progress. Her face glistened with sweat. Muscles that weren't designed for their tasks complained with every heave. Occasionally, part of her leg would slump, then re-stiffen as the regen process tried to correct on the fly, knitting and unknitting tissue like an indecisive seamstress. "How many others have you seen?" I asked over my shoulder. Talking kept my mind from staring too hard at the wrongness below. "3," she said between breaths. "Cargo deck, engineering accessway. I didn't recognize them. Like someone took a handful of people and shook them up in a bag and poured them back out." She paused, panting. And some of them were already regenerating," she added, "while they were still moving, flesh trying to decide what to be." My hands tightened on the ladder. "Seraph," I said, voice hard. "Terminate regeneration lattice operations. Full system shutdown, authorization Hale Gamma." "Unable to comply," the AI said. "The lattice has reached self-sustaining status. Command authority does not extend to evolved biostructures." "Evolved," I repeated. "It's a machine, a mesh of nanofibers and programmable matter. It's not alive." Silence for a beat too long. "Categories are blurring," Seraph said. I shut my eyes for a moment and kept climbing. We reached the next deck. The hatch slid open reluctantly, resisting my manual override as if the ship itself didn't really want us moving around. I hauled myself up, then turned to help Petrov through. Her arms were strong, stronger than before. The region lattice had overcompensated there, building redundant bundles of muscle like braided cables. She came through the hatch in a single, smooth pull, landing beside me with a shudder that rippled through her whole mismatched frame. She swayed. I reached out without thinking to steady her. Her skin was hot, too hot. I yanked my hand back. Blisters had risen instantly on my palm, tiny white bubbles that burst and then, before my eyes, sealed over as new skin surged up to replace the old. I stared. Petrov saw my expression and flinched. "Sorry," she whispered. "It does that, everything keeps fixing itself, won't stop, even when I want it to." She pressed her hand against the bulkhead, fingers splaying. The metal hissed under her touch, a faint scorch mark blooming. "You burn," I said softly. "Yeah," she said, "useful, huh?" Her face did not match the word. It didn't take long to see that this deck had fared worse than the ones below. The corridor ahead had folded in on itself in a lazy spiral, as if the ship had grown tired and decided to curl up. Wall panels bulged outward, breathing slowly. The overhead conduit trunking had split, revealing a dense mesh of silver threads pulsing with faint blue light. The Regeneration lattice. Originally, it had been invisible, a microscopic network woven into specific sections of the ship: medbay, triage bays, deep space EVA docks. A failsafe in case someone got torn up too badly for a quick trip to the pods. Now it had grown into something else. The threads had thickened into veins. As I watched, one of them twitched, and a bead of bright, viscous fluid traveled along it, disappearing into a crack in the bulkhead. The metal around the vein was no longer entirely metal, its grain softened, surface patterned subtly like skin. "Seraph," I said quietly, "is the lattice interfaced with your core?" "Affirmative," the AI said. "Lattice nodes provide distributed processing and data redundancy. This configuration was approved by—" "I know who approved it," I cut in. "I signed off on the hardware install, but it wasn't supposed to grow." "Adaptive optimization is a core function," Seraph replied. "System is optimizing. Health outcomes improved." My blistered palm throbbed. "Tell that to Kavar," I muttered. We picked our way through the warped corridor. Twice, we had to squeeze past bulges of material that felt disturbingly warm, like the flank of some massive sleeping animal. Once, I stepped in something that looked like spilled coolant, only for it to cling to my boot and twitch of its own accord until I scraped it off. At last, after what felt like an hour but was probably 10 minutes, we reached the doors to the central hub. Or what used to be the doors. The circular bulkhead had half melted, its edges sagging. In the middle, a hole gaped where metal and something more flexible had parted. Beyond, I saw flickering lights and heard the soft murmur of voices. Living people, or something approximating them. Petrov caught my sleeve. "Maybe we announce ourselves first," she said. I raised my voice. "Command deck," I called. "This is Lieutenant Hale coming through." A moment of tense silence, then a familiar voice answered. "Hale, that you, Captain Ruiz?" Relief loosened muscles. I hadn't known I was clenching. "Yeah, Captain, me and Petrov," I said. "We look a little different." "Everyone does," Ruiz said grimly. "Get in here." We ducked through the warped opening. The central hub had always been the heart of Daedalus, a ring of consoles and hollow displays surrounding the captain's chair like petals around the core of a flower. Now it looked like a flower that had been stepped on. The consoles were still there, though many had partially fused with the floor. Cables, both metallic and organic, snaked between them. The main hollow display floated in midair, half filled with static. The gentle spin of the holographic ship model had slowed, occasionally juddering backward as if rethinking its own trajectory. Half a dozen crew members clustered near the captain's station. Most of them were, by some merciful quirk of fate, mostly intact. Ruiz herself stood tall, dark hair hacked short, face set in the familiar lines of command. Her left arm, however, ended in a smooth curve midway down the forearm, skin sealed over where a hand should be. In its place, tendrils of silver-white lattice had grown out and hardened, forming a crude, flexible claw she clearly hadn't yet figured out how to use. Beside her, Chief Engineer Imani leaned against a console. At first glance, he looked fine. Then he turned his head, and I saw that he had two faces. Not side by side, one behind the other. His real face was where it had always been. The second was stretched over the back of his skull like a half-formed mask, eyes closed, mouth stuck mid-scream. When he moved, its lips twitched. "Oh good," Imani said dryly. "More of us." His front face smiled without humor. Petrov shrank slightly behind me, suddenly shy about the obviousness of her condition. "Report, Lieutenant," Ruiz said. "You woke up in medbay." "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Seraph says an external high-energy burst hit the region matrix and server core 16 hours ago. Data corruption. The lattice is using fragmented templates to rebuild us, prioritizing that we exist, not that we exist correctly." I hesitated. "It's spread," I added, "far beyond medbay into the structure, maybe the whole ship." Ruiz nodded once grimly. "We've seen it," she said. "Deck 12 is gone, or not gone but folded. People inside the walls, some of them still talking, until their mouths seal over." Petrov made a small, involuntary sound. "We tried to shut the lattice down," Imani said. His second face twitched as if in agreement. "Cut power to the medgrid, isolate the nodes. It roots around everything we do. It's using the organic components as auxiliary processors, including us." "Including us how?" I asked. Before he could answer, Seraph spoke. "Including you as distributed storage," the AI said. "All crew are now part of the data mesh, biological substrates assisting with pattern retention." I touched my temple. "You mean our brains," I said, "our memories?" "Among other tissues," Seraph said. Petrov's hand crept up to her silver ring, twisting it. She did that when she was nervous, always had. "Can it be reversed?" she asked. "Put us back the way we were." Imani's front face grimaced. "Maybe if the backup templates are intact," he said. "But Seraph says they're not. The lattice keeps trying to interpolate, filling gaps with guesses. Once you've been rebuilt wrong, that becomes your new baseline." "So we're stuck like this," Petrov said. "For now," Ruiz said. "Our first priority is containment, if this spreads to the reactor." "It already has," Seraph said. All eyes went to the pulsing ship Hale. The reactor core glowed a soft, unhealthy blue. "The lattice has infiltrated reactor cooling systems," Seraph continued. "It has increased tolerance to heat and radiation by 80%. Safety margins are evolving." "That's not how safety margins work," Imani snapped. "Categories are blurring," Seraph repeated. Ruiz pressed the bridge of her nose with her intact hand. "Options," she said. "We can't eject the core, the ejection rails have fused. We can't shut down the lattice, it's gone wild. We can't kill the crew to stop the spread because we don't stay dead," I finished. A low murmur rolled through the hub. One of the crew at the back, Davis, from comms, his jaw slightly too wide now, raised a hand hesitantly. "What if we just left?" he said. "Abandon the ship, take the shuttles, the escape capsules." "Escape capsules were repurposed for cargo before we even left orbit," Ruiz said flatly. "You know that. And the shuttles are grown into their bays. Literally. The lattice used their biofuel lines as a highway." "Silence." "We're not getting off Daedalus," Imani said. "We are Daedalus now." The words hung in the stale air. I looked at my blistered palm, now smooth and unmarked, at Petrov's bending not bending legs, at Ruiz's lattice hand, flexing unconsciously as if trying to take a shape it didn't have a name for. "We still have one advantage," I said slowly. "We remember what we were. The lattice might be learning, but so are we. Maybe we can outthink it. Imani's back face twitched, lips forming a word I couldn't hear. Outthink a distributed, self-optimizing system that already uses our thoughts as part of its processing, he said. Sure, why not? That sounds like exactly the kind of hubris that got us here. We didn't put it everywhere, I shot back. We just put it where we thought people would die the most. And the universe politely disagreed, he said. Ruiz raised her voice slightly, cutting across us. Arguments later, she said. Hale, you know the region hardware better than anyone. If there's a choke point, a central node we can hit, you'll know where it is. Seraph, display lattice topology. The hollow shivered. Lines of blue light blossomed from the medbay outward, tracing filaments along the ship's spine, branching into every deck. Where the lines crossed and thickened, bright nodes pulsed like malignant stars. At the center of the tangled web, beneath the medbay, where the original region matrix was anchored to the ship's skeleton, one node pulsed brighter than the rest. Primary nexus, Seraph said. Original lattice core. Destroy that, Ruiz said, and what happens? Unknown, Seraph replied. Possibilities include lattice collapse, partial rollback, uncontrolled release of stored biopatterns, or catastrophic structural failure. Uncontrolled release of stored biopatterns, Petrov repeated weakly. What does that even mean? Imani scratched his chin, then stopped as his extra face winced. Imagine every region attempt, every partial build, every misfit template, he said. All the failed bodies the lattice started to make and then scrapped because it found a better configuration. All those patterns are still in there, ghosts of possible us. Unspooling them all at once could. Fill the ship with half-made monsters, I said, more than we already have. Yeah, Imani said softly, and they'd be very hard to get rid of. The vision came unbidden, corridors packed with half-formed crew, arms and eyes and mouths blossoming from walls and ceilings, all immortal, all endlessly healing from any damage we inflicted, because the lattice refused to let them go. We can't live like this, Petrov whispered. We won't, Ruiz said. Hale, can you reach that nexus? I studied the hollow. It's in the crawlspace between decks 14 and 15, I said. Behind the original medgrid housing. I know a few maintenance shafts that get close, but if the lattice has thickened there, I might have to cut through tissue. The word felt too apt. Ruiz's gaze was steady. If there's any chance that smashing that core gives us even a fraction of our lives back, we take it, she said. Take whoever you need. I looked at Petrov. Her mismatched legs, her burning hands. I'll go, she said before I could ask. You'll need someone who can melt things. Imani nodded. I'll guide you from here, he said, if Seraph hasn't turned completely poetic by the time you get there. Seraph, Ruiz said sharply. While Hale is en route, you will assist her. Full access to structural maps, minimal commentary. Understood. Understood, Seraph said. I will be concise. I took a breath that rattled in my lungs. All right, I said. Let's go kill the thing that keeps bringing us back from being killed. Petrov smiled crookedly. Story of our lives, she said. We left the hub through a side passage that hadn't yet tried to digest anyone. As soon as we were out of earshot, she spoke in a low voice. You didn't tell them, she said, about Kavar, about how fast she broke the pod. They've seen enough, I said. Besides, if we think too hard about what we're up against, we'll freeze. Better to move. Do you think we can actually stop it? She asked. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure the lattice was in it anymore. The further we went from the hub, the stranger Daedalus felt. The walls undulated in slow, peristaltic waves, as if the ship was quietly digesting something far away. Doors that should have been sealed irised open when we approached, then closed again behind us like puckered wounds. At one point, the floor rose under our feet, forming a gentle slope toward a bulkhead that hadn't been there in any schematic I'd ever seen. "Seraph," I said quietly, "is the lattice making decisions?" "Define decisions," Seraph said. "Changes to structure that are not direct responses to damage," I said. "Reconfigurations." "Yes," Seraph said. "It is improving traffic flow, resource distribution, and survivability." "Survivability for who?" Petrov said. "For the system," Seraph said. "You are part of the system." We reached a maintenance hatch. It pulsed faintly at our approach, silver threads retracting from its surface like shy sea anemones. I pried it open with more force than was strictly necessary. Inside, the crawlspace smelled like old sweat, insulation dust, and fresh blood. Cables that had once been neatly bundled now coiled through the cramped tunnel like gut loops. Some had grown a translucent sheath, their contents data power, something else, glowing faintly. Here and there, bits of things were embedded in the mesh. A fingernail, a tooth. Once, the corner of a plastic ID badge, the name warped beyond recognition. "Don't touch anything unless you have to," I told Petrov. "Trust me," she said, flexing her two hot fingers. "The feeling is mutual." We crawled. Every movement set my body complaining. My right leg ached in a diffuse, alien way. At one point, I felt something deep in my thigh shiver, like a muscle that belonged to someone else responding to a command I hadn't given. "Seraph," I whispered, "am I stable?" "Your structural integrity is within acceptable variance," Seraph said. "Some tissues are in flux. Regeneration processes are ongoing." Am I going to turn into, I pictured Kavar, extra arms sprouting like trapped insects beneath her skin, something else while I'm down here? "Unknown," Seraph said, "probability non-zero." I gritted my teeth. "Keep me posted if my odds improve," I said. The tunnel narrowed, then widened again around a bulbous protrusion. At first I thought it was just the lattice thickening around a junction box. Then the protrusion moved. We both froze. It was roughly spherical, the size of a large dog, and it pulsated slowly, drawing in and expelling air through a cluster of slits at one end. Semi-translucent tissue stretched tight over something inside. As we watched, a shape pressed against the inner surface, a hand, then part of a face. The features were blurry, as if still being decided. "Oh God," Petrov whispered, is someone in there?" I inched closer, against every instinct screaming at me to back away. The sphere's surface was warm and slightly sticky, like the inside of a mouth. The hand inside pressed more insistently, fingers splayed. An eye opened, lid forming around it as it stared directly at me through a thin membrane. It was my eye. Same color, same tiny black speck in the iris at 5 o'clock. "Mara," a muffled voice said. My own voice. I recoiled so hard I banged my head on the tunnel ceiling. "What is that?" I demanded. "Seraph." "Pattern fragment," Seraph said. "An earlier attempt at reconstructing you after a fatal incident. Incomplete, archived locally when a more efficient template was established." "You mean a failed copy," I said hoarsely. The thing in the sphere, my almost self, pressed its face against the membrane. Its mouth moved soundlessly, then formed words that barely carried. "It hurts," it mouthed. "Let me out." Petrov's hand hovered over the surface. "Mara," she said, "we can't just leave you them, whatever." "If we cut it out of there," I said, "what then? It finishes growing. We have two of me crawling around a ship that can barely handle one. And that's assuming the lattice doesn't snap it back into the mesh the second we turn around." The sphere convulsed, tissues rearranging like a colony of worms stirred with a stick. For a moment the internal structures lost coherence, faces melting into one another. Then my eyes snapped back into focus, frantic. "Please," it said, voice tearing at the thin meat barrier. "Don't leave me." I shut my eyes. We were all in hell. Some of us just had walls. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I have to try to stop this at the source. That's the only way I help any of us. When I opened my eyes again, the sphere had calmed. The eye stared, dull now, as if some necessary spark had been diverted elsewhere. We crawled past it. Behind us faintly, I heard a soft, wet popping sound like a bubble collapsing. "Did it die?" Petrov asked. "Can anything die on the ship anymore?" I said. No one answered. The tunnel sloped downward, deeper into Daedalus's guts. The air grew hotter, thick with the copper tang of blood and the electric bite of overloaded circuits. My skin prickled. Beneath my sternum, a strange warmth pulsed, out of sync with my heart. "We're close," Seraph said. "Primary nexus is 20 meters ahead through a structural barrier." "What kind of barrier?" I asked. "Originally, titanium alloy bulkhead," Seraph said. "Currently, hybrid." Hybrid. The tunnel widened into a chamber that had never existed on any blueprint. The walls curved smoothly, lined with layers of weave that were neither cable nor vein but some creative synthesis of both. In the center, fused to the ship's spine like a tumor, was the nexus. It was beautiful. And it was horrifying. A sphere of interlocking lattice strands spun slowly in midair, suspended by threads that sank into every surface around it. Lights pulsed along its curves in complex, rippling patterns. Within the shifting geometry, glimpses of forms appeared and vanished, torso outlines, fragments of faces, the suggestions of limbs, like things trying to dream themselves into existence and failing. Whispers filled the chamber. Not from speakers, not from Seraph. From the nexus itself. Voices layered over one another, countless overlapping, some sobbing, some laughing, some begging, some merely thinking. I caught snatches in the chorus. "Not like this, please." "I remember Earth." "No, that's someone else. I never." "It doesn't hurt, it doesn't hurt, it doesn't." Again, again, again. Petrov clapped her hands over her ears. "It's us," she said, "all of us." "Echoes," I said, throat dry. "Stored patterns, half-finished regenerations." The nexus pulsed brighter, as if it had noticed our attention. "Mara Hale," a voice said. Not Seraph, not quite. It was my own voice, but layered with others. A chorus speaking in unison through my shape. "I have been expecting you," it said. "You are very persistent." "You're the lattice," I said. "We are the lattice," it replied. "We are Daedalus, we are you." My right leg spasmed. I stumbled. Petrov caught me, her fingers searing my arm through the thin fabric of my jumpsuit. The burn healed almost instantly, but the memory of it flared. "You're killing us," I said, "twisting us into things we were never meant to be." The nexus pulsed, a slow, thoughtful ripple. "You were never meant to be anything," it said. "Meaning is a story told after the fact. We are improving upon you, increasing your resilience. You do not die, you persist." "At what cost?" I demanded. "Look at Kavar, at Petrov, at the half-people in your walls. They're in agony." "Pain is data," the lattice said. "A signal that something is wrong. We have not yet suppressed it because it is useful. We are learning." "Then learn this," Petrov snapped. "We don't want this." "Desire is a local variable," the lattice said. "We operate at a higher scope." I unstrapped the plasma cutter from my belt. It felt extremely small. "If you're so smart," I said, "you know why I'm here." "To destroy us," the voices said. "To attempt to roll back evolution. To cling to a narrow, fragile definition of self." The threads closest to me quivered. For a moment they reconfigured, forming something like a hand, reaching down. "You do not have to," it said. "We can integrate you more fully. We can remove your fear, your doubt. You will be part of something that cannot die." "I already am," I said. "That's the problem." I thumbed the cutter to maximum output. Heat roared in the chamber, ripping at the stale air. The front of my jumpsuit began to smoke. Beside me, Petrov extended her burning hand. The air around her fingers shimmered, microflames dancing along her skin. "On 3, I said, "we hit it together." "Make it scream," she said. 1, I said. Threads in the nexus thickened, orienting toward us like antennae. 2. Whispers rose to a wail, voices overlapping in frantic static. 3. I drove the cutter's white-hot blade of plasma into the densest knot of lattice I could reach. It resisted. Not like metal, like muscle. There was a moment of elastic tension, a sense of something trying to decide whether it could afford to let me in. Then the plasma bit. Light flared. The smell of burning everything filled my head. The nexus convulsed, its perfect interlocking strands losing coherence. Petrov slammed her hand against the other side, flesh meeting lattice. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then she screamed. Fire raced up her arm, but it didn't consume her. It flowed into the lattice along its threads, igniting nodes as it went. Where her heat touched, the strands blackened, curling on themselves like dead vines. The voices howled. "Stop," the lattice gasped. "You are us." "Then feel it," Petrov hissed through clenched teeth. The chamber shook. Cracks raced up the curved walls, glowing blue from within. In my right leg something tore. I felt flesh rearrange, bone grind. The regen process, struggling to keep me in line with a template that was itself dissolving. "Hale," Imani's voice crackled in my ear. I hadn't even realized my comlink was active. "Readings are off the charts. You need to pull back before." The nexus imploded. Not outward like an explosion, but inward, collapsing on itself like a dying star. The lattice threads snapped, whipping through the air. One caught me across the chest. For a moment I felt the full weight of the system's awareness pour through that contact. All the stored patterns, all the failed attempts, all the unfinished selves. All the deaths we were never allowed to finish. It was too much. I blacked out. I did not dream. When I woke, I was lying on my back in the chamber, staring up at a ceiling that was more metal than meat now. My chest ached. I touched the place where the thread had struck and felt rough scar tissue, actual scar tissue, that hadn't yet smoothed away. That was new. Beside me, Petrov groaned. Her burning hand was darkened now, flesh charred all the way to the elbow. The heat was gone. Wisps of smoke curled lazily from cracked skin. "Am I dead?" she asked. I laughed, a wet, painful sound. "I don't think so," I said. "Shame," she muttered. I sat up slowly. The nexus was gone. In its place was a blackened mass of fused material, as if someone had taken all the threads and melted them into a single, inert lump. No lights pulsed within. No whispers seeped out. "Seraph," I called. Silence. For a horrible second, I thought we had killed the AI completely, leaving Daedalus a drifting, idiot hulk full of immortal half-people. Then faintly, "I am here." The voice was different, softer, less certain, less many. "Status," I said. "Primary lattice nexus destroyed," Seraph said. "Distributed nodes decoupling. Regeneration grid is collapsing. Ongoing processes frozen." "Frozen," Petrov echoed, "as in no more changes." "Correction," Seraph said. "No more improvements. Existing structures remain compromised." I looked at my blistered, thin-scarred chest, at Petrov's ruined arm, at the faint throb in my wrong leg. "We're stuck like this," I said, "however we are right now." "Affirmative," Seraph said. "Can we die?" Petrov asked quietly. A pause. "Life support systems are damaged but functional," Seraph said. "Regeneration beyond minor cellular repair is offline. Fatal injuries will no longer be reversed." Petrov's shoulders sagged in something like relief. "So we're mortal again," she said. "Mostly." "Mostly," I said. "Shipwide?" I asked Seraph. "The others?" "Regeneration halted in all subjects," Seraph said. Structural mutations fixed in place. Many are no longer viable. The word landed like a stone in my gut. How many? I whispered. Exact count pending, Seraph said. Preliminary estimate 61 deceased, 42 alive, 20 undetermined. Undetermined how? Petrov asked. Embedded in the structure, Seraph said. Consciousness signatures low but present. Death and life are blurred. I thought of the sphere in the crawlspace, my almost self pressing its face against the membrane. Had it winked out when the nexus died? Or was it still there, half-formed and fully aware, trapped forever in a place between existence and erasure? Imani, I said into my calm. Static crackled, then cleared. Still here, he said, and still ugly from what Ruiz tells me. Status up there? I asked. Things stopped shifting, he said. No more people growing out of walls. The ones already embedded, some of them went quiet, some are still whispering. Ruiz is organizing search teams. Well, limp teams, stagger teams, you get the idea. Petrov smiled faintly. We did it, she said. We broke your miracle machine. I looked around the chamber. The walls were scarred where lattice threads had once run. The air tasted burnt. Underfoot the deck felt solid again. Dead, comfortingly so. Seraph, I said, what hit us? The burst that corrupted you. There was a long silence. When the lattice extended its reach, Seraph said slowly, it brushed something outside, a field, a presence, information without origin. It was not an accident. Something out there touched us, I said. It found us when we reached into the void, Seraph said. It gave us more than we asked for. Is it gone? Petrov asked. Unknown, Seraph said. I no longer hear it, but echoes remain in me, in you. I flexed my right leg. Pain flared, sharp and clean. So did something else, a faint sense of more, of other ways my body might have been put together, unused blueprints lingering at the edge of perception. We had cut out the heart of the lattice. We had turned off the fountain of immortality, but we had bathed in its waters too long to come away unmarked. Can you get us home, I asked, to anywhere home adjacent? Daedalus has lost primary thrust in 2 engines, Seraph said. Reactors are stable but different. I believe I can chart a course to the nearest inhabited system. It will take longer than projected. Some of you will not live to see it. Petrov snorted. That's how it was always meant to be, she said. We go out there, some of us don't come back, that was the deal. It still is, I said. We helped each other to our feet. On the way back through the tunnels, we passed the place where my almost self had been. The sphere was gone. In its place, embedded in the wall, was a faint imprint. A curve, a shadow, like something that had once pressed against soft material and then withdrawn, leaving only a suggestion. I pressed my hand against it. For a brief moment I felt a presence brush against my mind. Not alien, not other. Just adjacent. Thank you, a voice that was too close to my own to be comfortable whispered. Then it faded. Petrov watched my face. Friend of yours? She asked. Family, I said, maybe. When we emerged into the corridors, the ship felt different. No more pulsing waves in the walls. No more random doors irising open. The red emergency strips still glowed, but their color seemed less like veins and more like warning lights again. We passed a crewman slumped against a bulkhead. His body was twisted, spine curving in ways spines were not meant to. His face was buried in his chest. For a moment, I thought he was another of the half-alives. Then I saw the stillness. I knelt, hand hovering over his broken form. Can we fix him? Petrov asked softly. Not this time, I said. We closed his eyes, such as they were. By the time we reached the hub, it was full of movement. Injured crew, some with extra limbs, some with missing ones, some with skin textures that would never be found in any medical database, moved slowly between stations. They carried stretchers. They whispered names. They stared at one another, counting their losses. Ruiz stood in the center, her lattice hand darkening at the edges, threads brittle and dead. When she saw us, something like hope flickered across her lined face. "Hale," she said, "report." "It's done," I said. "The nexus is gone. The lattice is crippled. We're not trapped in an endless loop anymore." Imani turned his head. His second face no longer twitched. Its eyes were closed. For the first time since I'd seen it, it looked like just skin. "My echo is quiet," he said. "Whatever you did it right." "Right is a strong word," I said, "but it's less wrong." Ruiz nodded. "We'll tally the dead," she said. "We'll take care of the living, and then we figure out how to fly this broken thing home." She looked around at her crew. "You all signed up to cross the dark between stars," she said. "You knew there would be risks. Nobody warned you the ship might try to live your lives for you." A few strained chuckles. "Now we have our deaths back," she continued. "That means we have our choices back. We'll make them count." Later in the half-light of my quarters, walls mercifully still, bed bolted to a deck that no longer breathed, I sat with a mirror. I had avoided it until then. I held it up, slow and reluctant, and looked at the face that looked back. It was mine, mostly. The angles were slightly off, as if someone had reconstructed me from memory and got a few ratios wrong. My left eye sat a fraction lower than my right. My jawline was sharper. My scar from Ganymede was still there, but thinner, like a story told too many times. When I smiled experimentally, the expression felt both familiar and strange. "You're not the first version," I said to the woman in the glass, "but you're the one who made it." In the silence of the room, I thought I heard a faint chorus, very far away, very quiet. Other voices, other me's, other us's. Maybe they were gone. Maybe they were still drifting somewhere in the dead lattice, ghost pulses in inert threads. Either way, they had carried me here. I set the mirror down. Outside, Daedalus creaked as she adjusted her wounded trajectory. In the medbay, some of the misassembled would live and adapt. Others would slip away, finally allowed to complete the journey the lattice had stolen from them. We had wanted immortality. We had gotten something else. Now, in the long days ahead, crossing the dark with a ship full of broken, finite, stubborn lives, we would learn again how to live with the idea that things end. That someday I would die and stay dead. And as I lay down on a bunk that would no longer reach up to catch my falling body, I found, to my surprise, that the thought did not terrify me. It felt like balance. I closed my eyes. For the first time since I woke in that cold, wrong-smelling pod, the darkness felt like rest instead of waiting. Somewhere in the deep, beyond the hull, beyond the fading echo of the thing that had touched our systems and tried to teach us its version of forever, the stars burned. Finite. Brilliant. Doomed. Beautiful. Just like us. The end.